Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Good Times Hour. All right, Paul, take it away.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world, please rise to attention and welcome to the tee our next very special guest. He's an alum from FSU where the Bulldogs rock him and sock him wearing the cardinal red and blue. And he has a PhD from UNC in the Mile High State in assessing the bee and making the case that the object is not only legit, but great. And now he's keeping it real as a Tar Heel stan and a Thelma Lou fan on that last train to Jonesville. But he's still making it rain by growing the game one smile and many miles at a time. He's the assistant professor who's assisted a whole mess of kids in throwing the big lids. And he's the best friend to Tom Seaver and a major weaver of the Frisbee thread through the mosaic of history. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our next player on the tee. Joining us from the great state of NC, one of the original Frisbee master pioneers and the grandfather of disc golf, Hall of Famer, George, the chairman of the board, Sappenfield.
Well, thank you very much. I didn't realize I was that, so I'm glad to find out who I am.
It's all about context, but
yeah, no, that was great. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, and thank you for being with us today. We had a couple of technical difficulties, so we're starting a little bit later, but thank you for taking the time to sit down and chat some Frisbee history with us. Mace, why don't you give a little bit of the framework for our guest here?
All right, so we're sitting down obviously with George Sappenfield. He's number 376. His PDJ number is 376. He's originally from Fresno, California, and now he's joining us from Jonesville, North Carolina. He's from the Hall of Fame class of 2018. He went in with Jay Redding and Andy Lehman, and both of those folks have already been here with us. So you're the third of your class to sit down with us, and we really do appreciate you joining us. You're assistant executive director of the World Disc Golf Hall of Fame, and you have a PhD in commercial recreation. And honestly, I'd like to see if I couldn't test out on that degree myself, because I'm pretty good at recreating.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Yeah.
Well, so one of the things that we always talk to people about is the PDGA number. And I think Paul dug it up that you got your number in 1977. Is that correct?
That's correct. Right.
And
yeah.
Were you somewhere specific? I mean, was there a specific reason? Do you have I could have had a lower number, lower PDGA number story, like a lot of the people that we talk to?
Right. Well, we all have those stories, I think. No, actually, my supposedly, and this is coming from Ed Hedrick, supposedly I was supposed to be one of the ones that was given an early number. And when I forget where we were, but anyway, Ed asked me what my number was. And I said, Ed, I don't have a number yet. And he said, yeah, you do. And I said, no, I don't. So anyway, I said, well, I'll sign up right now. And so that's what I did. So that was my number at 376. But whether Ed did forget or thought he already had or whatever, but that's how I got to where I was. But
early onset senility prevented you from having PDJ number 5.
But you were so you were active far earlier than the 376 number then, huh?
Oh yeah.
I mean obviously we're going to cross that topic here in a little bit when we talk about your activity in the 60s. But so the PDJ database says that you only been a member since 87, which obviously isn't correct. But it doesn't really have any record of you playing in events. Did you play in any tournaments? Or were you just an organizer the whole time?
I was basically organizer. I played in some of them in the 70s, but I stopped playing in the 80s because in 1984 I developed Guillain-Barré syndrome. And I don't know if you know what that is, but it's a neurological disease. In fact, I woke up one morning and could not get out of bed. I couldn't move. Nothing was working. And so I went went to the doctor, and my regular doctor wasn't there. And I had had food poisoning about a week before. And so the doctor that was there said, your electrolytes are all messed up. So, you know, here's Gatorade and all that stuff. And go home, lay down, and you'll be better. Well, I wasn't any better in the afternoon. So I went back to the doctor, and my regular doctor was there by then. And so I had no, he did the hit my knee and no reaction. So anyway, he said, well, you've got one of four things. You've either got a brain tumor, you've got polio, you've got the beginnings of MS, or you have Guillain-Barré syndrome, which I had never heard of and sounded actually worse than the others. So he said, let's hope that's what it is. But he said, you're going to the hospital. So I went to the hospital, and what Guillain-Barré syndrome is, it's the little nerve fibers on your nerves. It strips those. And so you just lose all action. And so I was in the hospital for about 3 weeks. And so with the Guillain-Barré syndrome, they grow back, those little fibers on your nerves grow back, but it takes a while. And the scary part about it is if it gets into your lungs, because if gets into your lungs and those shut down, and then you go on a respirator. So I was blessed to not have that happen, but there have been people that have. And so at the time, they really didn't know how to treat it or anything. So it was just a matter of waiting it out. And and I waited it out, and there's about 3 to 4 weeks in the hospital, and then I was able to kind of start moving around. But it affected. I mean, I could still do fairly well, but I did not come all the way back physically. So that's why I'm just going to keep running tournaments and promoting disc golf and all that, and I'll have a great excuse as to why I'm not good. So,
well, it is definitely a kind of a rarity in the frisbee and early disc golf world where the TDs weren't also players. I mean,
right.
Much so less now, but back in the day, you had Dan Ginley was just par for the course, and all the TDs played in their own events because it usually was not as complex, and they just loved it. They loved being a player. They loved to do it.
Yeah,
and all of us have run tournaments, and
right.
it takes a certain sacrifice to step back and say, okay, I'll be the one not to play and let you guys have the fun. But you've been stepping back and being kind of the coach on the bench while other people got all the ice time throughout history.
Well, that's true, and I'd love to play, but it was a feeling that I felt like if you're running something, then if you're going to have to make a decision on a ruling or whatever, I don't want to be in that position. And so, but I still love playing, and I did in a couple of tournaments. I played. So that's why I have no record of competition or anything, but it's not to say that I didn't.
Well, I mean, especially with the PDJ database is great for preserving PDJ tournaments and also some other tournaments. Lots of IFAs. The World Frisbee Championships are on there, and certain other IFA events. But it doesn't tell the whole story, and especially because they have you starting at 87. Whatever rich frisbee history that you participated in as a player as well is kind of, thanks to the PDJ database, not really preserved in history so far. So it's good to know that there exists the truth outside of the actual records.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you giving me the format to explain why.
Yeah, well, that's one of those things, one of those questions that folks probably wouldn't feel comfortable asking unless they knew you, and so it's good to get that out there and have a little explanation. I pretty much have taken that same role as you now. I did play a lot in the early 2000s and also through most of the 90s, and then I found that it was it was a lot more fun to like go to the Worlds and not play. Because it doesn't
Yeah,
matter if you get into a conversation with like you two until 2 or 3 in the morning and you're just like, oh, well, okay, well, I'll see y'all at breakfast. And it won't matter, because we're not going to play, we're just going to spectate. So
yeah. Well, and part of it, because when we, with Whammo, I was kind of an unpaid consultant, but they knew that I could run events well and stuff. So the Rose Bowl events, I was the event director for those. And so it was everything except the detailed tournament play. And that Stork ran that. But I helped run all the rest of the stuff and all that.
Well, we're going to jump into all that in a little
Yeah.
bit, but before we do, I want to take you to your origin story. I know that you're from Central California, from the Central California Valley, originally born in Lindsay, moved to Fresno, where you basically grew up from a junior little kid all the way through. You went to Cal State at Fresno there. You played a lot of sports, notably baseball, and your best friend growing up was Tom Seaver, who went on to some distinction in the baseball world. Did you play other sports as a child before you got? I know when you're 14 in 1959, you get your first Pluto platter, but up until that point, had you had other sports on your horizon?
Yeah, baseball was the main one, but I played um, basketball also, not well, but
yeah,
and
me
then I
neither.
wasn't, and I was not huge in build, so I didn't even attempt football. Um, but baseball was the primary one.
And when you did get that first Pluto platter, did that were you inventing games on your own, or was it just catch? Did you have the curiosity about it?
Yeah, well, it's a combination because I was 14 and had just driven up and gotten back from church. So we're getting out of the car, and our neighbor yelled to me. He said, "Hey, George," and he said, "Catch this." So he threw me the Pluto platter, and so I caught it, and then I threw it back, and I actually threw it back fairly well. But I was just fascinated by the way that flew, and so in his yard, in my neighbor's yard, there was a pine tree that we would get out and we'd try to curve it around the pine tree or skip under it or whatever. So that was my introduction to it.
Wow,
Um,
that's
and
cool.
Nice.
yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah. So it was great fun, and we actually, my neighbor and I actually did our little version of hitting trees. Uh, for a couple of, we didn't call it frisbee golf, but we just used it as an accuracy kind of thing. But
Wow.
that was the beginning. Yeah.
Okay, so now one thing that we want to put into perspective here, because it is all of this information is available on the internet, but not a lot of people go trouble themselves to go find it. But in addition to you, it's interesting. Disc golf, the origin of disc golf has kind of multiple sites and multiple times of origin. But here we are in Southern California. You're in Fresno in the same time in 1959 in Newport Beach. Kevin Donnelly is inventing his own thing. Mace, let's talk about that.
Right on. Yeah. So, and we're gonna throw some. I'm gonna throw some dates out here relatively quickly, and then we can dig into this a little bit further. But so 57, The Frisbee is created by Richard Nur, or is it Nur or Kerr?
Nur.
Nur. Okay, and that from Whammo. And then 59, Kevin Donnelly plays street Frisbee golf, I guess for the first time, and maybe was doing that regularly. Then in 63, Rice University in Houston holds a tournament using trees as targets. And so early in the early 60s, players were playing in Pendleton King Park in Augusta as well. So it's popping up. They're throwing Frisbees into 50-gallon barrels, trash cans, I guess, that were designated as targets. Then 64, Whammo hires Steady Ed. 65, Whammo sponsors Frisbee golf tournament that's organized by Kevin Donnelly. And then in 67, Donnelly teaches the first university disc golf class. So all of that kind of leads up to your collision with Kevin Donnelly. And at the same time, you were doing your own thing in this, wherever you were at as well.
Yeah.
There in Fresno.
Right. In Fresno. Yeah. And the interesting thing is, nobody invented the game of disc golf. I mean, it's like, there's people that have been hitting trees and light poles and all that. And, we called Frisbee golf. Like I said, my neighbor and I, we did 2 or 3 holes. We didn't call it that, but and it was more accuracy kind of thing. Kevin Donnelly did his version of Frisbee golf in 65, because he was doing the street version. And so his was for kids. And so, yeah, that's the video of it.
Frisbee golf tournament, Saturday, December 4th, 1965.
Right. Yeah. And so that was, his version. And I think he did get products from Whammo, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look at all those hula hoops.
Yeah. So
right even there, it says hula hoop.
Yeah, right. And
but it's
so,
interesting. The two of you guys have the same idea to use hula hoops and Frisbees together. Like at the same time across different parts of the state.
Well, right. And the way it happened for me was because my undergraduate was in recreation. And so one of the instructors, we had just had made a big deal about make sure that if you are a recreation leader, that you make use of all the land that you have, make sure you use all the equipment that you have. And so I was actually playing ball golf. It was a Friday afternoon, and I had hit my ball off into the woods, as I often did. And so I was standing there waiting my turn to hit. And I'm thinking about the playground that I was at on the weekends had a picnic area that was hardly ever used, and also had Frisbees and hula hoops. And the Frisbees were used, but the hula hoops really weren't. And so I was standing there waiting my turn, and I visualized this Frisbee flying through a hula hoop. And I'm on a golf course, and and I had been doing this. So anyway, it clicked that, well, maybe that's what we'll do. So that was
All
a Friday.
These ideas just collided at the same time during a round of golf. That's awesome.
Yeah, and so that next morning, Saturday, I headed the playground. I got the kids together, and I said, we're gonna make a new target for our Frisbees. And so
there's a water hazard.
We set up, we set up four holes in that picnic area, and so we would set that up probably every couple of weeks, and so that was my approach of a standardized hole.
I find it interesting. Imagine if you didn't shank into the woods, would you have had the time to stand there and reflect amongst the beauty of nature? Would this idea have come to you in that kind of way?
Yeah, I don't I don't think it would have, but you never know.
So there you go. Shanks can have a valued purpose.
Yeah, I was just
Yes, it
thinking the same thing, man. It's
yeah,
not always
yeah.
bad when you find yourself off in the woods.
Right. So, but so anyway, so that, so I would then, like I said, at the playground, we would set up the holes, uh, every 3 or 4 weeks, and just, it was fun. And
And this
so
was specifically for the Parks and Rec, like
right.
that local area for that parks.
Yeah.
It wasn't
Yeah.
even citywide or anything. It was just for that.
No,
Yeah.
no. And it really wasn't a tournament of any kind or anything. It was just, it was a fun event.
So you
And
had kickball, you had other types of games that would, the kids could play. Where did George's Frisbee Fun rank in terms for the kids? Did they really rise to it? Did they love it?
yeah, they did. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. In fact, it was interesting because one of the things that I learned being in recreation is that uh, you never let an event, or activity, or whatever, if possible, if you have the control to stop it, you always stop it before people say, "I'm tired." Okay, and the
Always
best
leaving
thing,
one or more.
right, best thing that you can have said to you is, "Hey, I'm, we got to stop." Well, no, I don't want to stop. Let's keep playing. Let's keep
Yeah,
playing.
right on.
Right, and so that's the way I kind of approach everything, recreation wise, and that happened when I was setting up these holes. The kids started coming in and saying, "Hey, let's set this up. Let's
Okay.
play, let's play frisbee golf." And
So wait, I have a
but
question. Okay, you're standing there in the golf course and you're thinking this idea for the kids. Had you even thrown like at this? Had you tried it out before? This was an idea that you'd never tried before?
uh, right, no, I hadn't.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
That's a
and
bit,
really, if I hadn't heard that lecture, make sure you use everything you've got, I don't know that it would have clicked.
wow.
I mean, I did like accuracy throwing, but it was always, thrown at a pole or a tree or whatever. So, I don't know. I mean,
That's
God
amazing.
only knows.
Well, and
Well,
that's I talk about this all the time, and especially with the guys that work for me or spending time around me at events and stuff, and until until someone tells you to think this way, you're probably not going to. But it also sometimes it kind of takes time for these ideas to incubate, and obviously you had done a few other things. You'd thrown some shots and played catch and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait a minute, here comes one idea and another idea and then another idea from the other direction, and they all just come together at the right time in the right place, and then it's almost like swimming through the small end of the funnel, so to speak. Like once you've gotten through the small end, then the world's your oyster and you have so much space for the potential growth of ideas like that.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I always like to, be creative and try new things or whatever, try to make something better or whatever. But like I said, I did not, I didn't have a tournament like Kevin had set up in his thing, but I had no clue that was going on until my senior year, and Kevin became an instructor at Fresno State in recreation.
I was just about to mention that. So that was in 67.
That was, yeah, well, yeah, 60, 68, fall of 68, spring of 67. So that was my senior year. And that's
Okay.
when he came. And so, and you know, one of his lectures, he talked about Frisbee golf. And so I raised my hand and I said, well, I've been playing that myself. And so that was the irony and the fact that we ended up in the same class, and we're talking about, Frisbee golf, and we used the same thing for targets. So,
Now, I have two questions for you. One is, do you remember the mark you got in that class? Was it a good mark?
no, I don't remember, but
But
I was able to graduate, so I guess
so he mentions disc golf, but he's doing a class on frisbee. So at that time in 1967, we see in the 70s the wonderful explosion of different types of disc events. I think MTA or self-caught flight or versions of that probably have been around as long as golf has. But what other types of things was he teaching you guys in that class? Do you remember?
Well, I mean, actually, it wasn't a frisbee class. It was a regular, just general recreation class.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. So, and after I graduated, he may have taught a strictly frisbee class, but that was not, it was just like a history class or
Oh, okay.
English class or whatever. And he just happened to mention that
Wow.
that was one of the events that he did, and so that's what did, so my hand shot up, and so and we actually became good friends, and we played a lot, but that year it was never I'm going to take a frisbee class. It was
Okay.
it was just
Yeah,
part of a
I was gonna ask that because like I was kind of, well, I've become aware of a lot of my mistaken ideas in the last 6 weeks as we've been interviewing the Pioneer women and now yourself too. We're going way back, like I was born in 66, so I was just a kid when you guys were doing or even a baby as you were developing or introducing the idea of frisbee golf, I guess is the best way of putting it there. And then in the 70s, I remember roaming the neighborhood with a master frisbee with a bunch of my buddies, and we were just picking Billy's mailbox for a par three, and we did. One of
yeah
the guys in the neighborhood had already played plenty of ball golf and enough ball golf to know that to tell us about those rules, and so we applied those rules. And when I saw it the first time, I was like, "Oh, we made that up in the 70s in Kansas," and
Yeah.
and then how many other people have that same story?
Yeah.
Like, and it's
Right.
ironic that you and Kevin have a similar story from the 60s when it truly was being made up. So that's really cool. But another thing that I learned from you when we were talking yesterday was about Kevin then going to work for Disney World when it first opened. And like, well, my background in entertainment, like I just like the wheels started turning and going, I wonder what was allowed and what wasn't allowed. And they must have had a really nice budget even at the time. Still, like it had to have been a super unique experience. And then he's talking to you about potentially coming to work, which unfortunately never came to fruition. But that had to have been some interesting conversations that you were involved in there.
Yeah, because I had, well, when I graduated from Fresno State, the next year I went to San Francisco State and got my master's. So I had that, and then had gotten my first job in Thousand Oaks, California, with the Caneo Recreation Parks District. So I was a recreation supervisor, and that's where I did my Frisbee golf tournament. That was written up and all that. But and that was the link that connected me with Ed Hedrick, and was able to start convincing him that frisbee golf was something to pay attention to and that people like to play. And so that's how that ended up in the all comers meet, which I assume we'll talk about
We
later.
definitely will, but here is the
Yeah.
newspaper coverage. This is
Right. So that was on
Monday,
May
May
3rd.
5th, 1969. So yours was May 3rd. So it was the Saturday.
Yeah. The article was May 5th, but
Yeah.
yeah. But anyway, so that, and that's the hole, and I'm the one that's pulling the frisbee out of the water.
Yeah, that probably would have been me too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the way, I can't help but feel like I missed my calling as a recreation director.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
like, I keep hearing that and I'm going, wait a minute, this should have been me.
Yeah, well, it's very much fun, and in fact, all my degrees are in some form of recreation. And so anyway, but that happened, and ironically, I had met Ed. Uh, I was I joined the California National Guard in 1968, and right after I got my master's. And so I got a letter saying you got to report for basic training, and uh, and that was it was in Fort Knox, Kentucky. So there were 6 of us from Fresno who were in that had joined the National Guard, and so all 6 of us were headed to Fort Knox, Kentucky on July 4th. And our flight was out of LAX, well, Fresno to LAX, and then to Louisville. But so while we're waiting to get on the flight in LA, all of a sudden I hear this loud noise, and this guy's talking real loud, and he was throwing mini MINI discs and Super Balls with people.
Nice.
Yeah, the small mini Super Balls. And so I look up, and it was Ed. Now I had never seen Ed,
Really?
but
Wow.
yeah, and they were, and I can't remember who he was with, but they were headed to the IFT in the UP
Okay.
of Michigan to play guts, and
Okay.
that was their team. So anyway, and I had already joined the IFA, so my IFA number was 209, and so because I just loved frisbee, so I was very excited to hear and see Ed, and so I walked up and introduced myself, and so he was pleasant, and I said, I've been playing a game called frisbee golf, and he said, I don't know if you know about it or whatever, and he said, no, I said, guts is really the game and stuff, and we're headed out, and he said, here's my card, and went off. Kind of blew me off, and I'm thinking, I was just so excited to to meet Mr. Whammo, and so on the flight, I wasn't looking forward to going to basic training as it was anyway, but on the flight, I got to thinking, I, I've just seen too many people enjoy frisbee golf, and I had done that tournament and stuff, and the kids really enjoyed it, and so I said, well, I'm gonna make this happen. I mean, I'm gonna stick on this. So basic training, it was 6 months, and so when I got finished, I wrote to Ed. And I said, I'm going to do this frisbee golf tournament, and I would like if you could donate some frisbees and hula hoops for it. And so they did, and
Nice.
yeah, and so and I even mentioned Kevin Donnelly to Ed, and Ed said, I don't remember, which is not surprising with Ed, not, but anyway, but he didn't remember that, but I knew that Kevin had done his little tournament in '65 and stuff. So,
Right.
but anyway, so that's when I found out that they were going to do this all comers meet, sponsored by, sanctioned by the IFA, in the fall of '69. And so that after we did the tournament in May, Irv Lander, who had just recently been hired by Whammo as a PR guy, he came out and saw the tournament and was impressed with how much people enjoyed playing, but also was impressed with the way I had organized it and all that. And so Irv had just taken over running the National Hula Hoop Championships and Junior Frisbee Championships. So he had asked me if I could be a consultant with him, and I said sure. So, but anyway, but Irv said, well, we ought to have Frisbee golf in this all comers meet, and I said, yeah, it'd be good. So I called Ed, and Ed said, no, we've got accuracy and distance and all those things, and so anyway, but I'm kind of jumping off ahead of where you probably want to go.
Well, that's all right.
Yeah, you know what? We might as well just go right there. Okay, let's just talk about the all comers meet. I mean, you had impressed Irv, and by the way, at your Thousand Oaks tournament there, did Fred Morrison also show up?
No.
Is that when he? No. Okay.
No.
He just came to
I
the
think
all comers
Fred.
meet.
I think Fred may have shown up at Kevin's.
Okay.
Thing.
Fred Morrison, of course, invented the flying
Right.
saucer.
Right.
Okay, so the all comers meet. Now this is your second attempt at swaying Ed's opinion. The first event, and it sounds like something straight out of a movie of the scene, like flash and glamour, and there's Ed throwing super balls and minis all over the place, and it's almost you can see the spotlight on him, and he's Mr. Whammo at the time, and he brushes you off. It's only about guts at that time. You come back to him after the success of your event, and you say, what about disc golf? And he says, no, now it's only accuracy, distance, all these other things. What swayed his mind? Was it Irv? Did you try for a third time? Was the third time the charm?
I think it was because I think what really got me excited about Frisbee golf was it was a range of ages, because that tournament that I set up was basically for kids. But who showed up were parents and kids, and they're all playing together and just having a good time. So that's why,
there's a picture from the all comers meet right there.
Yeah.
And we've got kids, we've got middle timers, we've got adolescents, we got the whole range.
Yeah. But this is the all comers meet.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the Frisbee tournament I did in Thousand Oaks.
No, but you were saying that was just for kids,
right.
whereas the all comers was for the whole spectrum. And
right. Yeah.
That's some of the spectrum right there.
Right. And so Irv and I were talking about something to do with the junior Frisbee thing, and I said, I really think we need to put Frisbee golf in that all comers meet. And Irv said, well, I don't know, Ed's kind of, when he makes up his mind, that's kind of the way it is. And I said, well, can we at least do one more shot at it? And so I called again, and I knew about the Berkeley group, that they had their own course on campus, and so I'd heard about them. So I said, well, Ed, how about let's just try it and see who shows up, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but at least we'll have tried it. And so that's when he said, okay. But then the other interesting thing was that Brookside Park doesn't exist anymore outside the Rose Bowl. It's all parking now. But anyway, that park had open land, but also it had trees along the side. And so Ed said, well, the only thing is you cannot don't put any targets out in that open area. They've all got to be in the trees. And and the irony of that.
At the very beginning, we were getting the undesirable land and doing the best we could with it. And we still today, yeah, sure, we could use that land. That'll be fun. Yeah. What? Nobody else wants it? Even better.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. So that was.
I'm gonna interrupt you just for a quick sec to digress. Talking about the Berkeley group, I told you this story when I met you in South Carolina, but tell it again to the Good Times Hour. So I was looking to do my master's in literature, and I was checking out some of the schools that I could go to, and one of the very few that accepted me because it was a short list was Case Western Reserve in Cleveland. And so I'd gone down there after it was on between the Great Lakes Open in Ann Arbor and the AM Worlds down in Cincinnati. I just veered over to Cleveland to tour the campus, maybe meet the professor in charge, who might have been in charge of my studies. Turned out I misjudged the distance of Ohio. It's a much bigger state than I would have thought it was. And so I realized I had to cut short my meeting. And so I was on the phone to the guy who was going to give me the tour of the campus and the department. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't make it. I apologize. And he said, okay, well, why? And I said, well, you're gonna think I'm lying, but I'm going to a frisbee golf tournament. And there was silence on the phone. I thought, yeah, okay, here we go. He's laughing or something. And he goes, did you say frisbee golf? I said, yeah. It's called disc golf, but who knows And he goes, because I thought I invented that. He was one of the Berkeley group guys. They would drop acid and take out their moonlighters and play on the ball golf course, and they play to the sticks on to the flags. So
Really?
I could have been studying with the guy that found out about it from you back in the original day. It's just the way life works.
That's very interesting. But that's what, like there's probably 100 people that have said, well, I'm the one that invented frisbee golf.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, we've got this here, and I don't want to steal your thunder here. We're going to Mace, but we're going to jump into the whammo section here. But it's a
Oh, that's
burning
fun.
question of mine, and I want to know if you know who was the one who wrote the two famous phrases, "play catch, invent games," and "flat flip, fly straight." Do you know who wrote those two?
I do.
Okay.
Do
Yes.
you do you know?
No, of course. I'm asking
It
you.
it was Fred Morrison's wife.
Wow.
Who
Really?
Yeah, yeah. And when Fred was inventing the disc, the flying saucer and stuff, uh, and he and his wife would go out and do demonstrations. Um, and so, but she's the one that came up with flat flip, fly straight, and play catch and invent games.
Because I think honestly, with that's you can't trace all of the spontaneous
Right.
inventions of disc golf to that alone, but that certainly spurred imaginations. Because the extent of sales of the frisbee and before that the Pluto platter were huge across North America, across Europe, and how many kids took the time to read the bottom of the lid and go, okay, let's invent some games.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly what has happened. You
Yeah,
know.
it's a fascinating story. But
Yeah, it
let's talk.
really is. And the thing too that like the other things that that I kind of uncovered from our conversation yesterday, and it really never occurred to me that anybody would ever say that whammo was a small fish in a big pond, but you were around when that was the truth, and that that's really interesting, to think about. Well, they just started selling slingshots, and then you mentioned briefly that they then went to the crossbows, and the first thing that I thought about was, is this the first lawn dart in the in the history of the United States? Because I don't know how many people got an eye put out by a crossbow, but I can imagine a few people got their hides welted by those slingshots. So, and I mean, I know how I was when I was a kid.
Yeah. Well, it's 1948 that Rich Nur and Spud Malin were buddies at USC in Southern California, and they started the mail order business of selling slingshots, and that's where the name Whammo came from the action of the slingshot. But it was hunting. Hunting. I mean, it was targeted to hunters, and that's what the crossbow was, and all that.
So it
So
wasn't
they
intended to be a toy in any way.
no, no, yeah.
Yeah.
Good thing.
But then their first toy was not the frisbee though. What was their first toy?
They're what?
Their first toy that Whammo released. That was
Hula hoop.
the hula hoop.
right. And that was because they ran into the guy from Australia had come to the United States to try to convince some manufacturer to join in and make his bamboo exercise hoop. So it was a hoop made out of bamboo, and he had been in the United States a couple of weeks and just was not having any luck with any toy company or sporting goods company or whoever. And I forget exactly how they met, but it was Rich and met this guy, and that was in 55, late 54, early 55. And so Rich said, well, we're not interested in doing it out of bamboo, but plastic was becoming the product to use. And so, they said, well, let's see if we can make it out of plastic. And so that's how the hula hoop came about. And when Whammo put it out there, it's still, if not the number one, it's the top 3 toy fads in the history of the toy industry.
And
Really?
this is something to put it in a context. We're so suffused with entertainment options in the modern world. Toys were huge things in the 50s, and because that's all there was. There was, you had chess, you had comic books, and you had toys. Those are the things that you could get a kid through the day. And when something hit fad status like that, that was the original viral, right?
Yeah, yeah, right. And in fact, Whammo, well, what really made it take off was Whammo had a couple of kids outside a toy store doing the hula hoop at a mall. And so people got fascinated. Well, one of the people that walked by was a choreographer on the Dinah Shore show and didn't see it as a toy. He saw it as something they could use in one of their dance routines on the show.
Oh, that makes sense. That totally makes sense how they tied that in.
Yeah, so they did that, and people saw that, and then Art and Linkletter got into it. He had kids say the darndest things show and stuff, and so between the Dinah Shore choreographer and then the kids say the darndest things kind of show, that all of a sudden people, well, I want a hula hoop. And so that's when Whammo just started cranking them out, and they had to open places across the country to make it because they were running out of them. And the minute they shipped things, in fact, there was a great picture in Whammo with 18-wheeler on the street outside of Macy's in New York, and they're selling hula hoops out of the back of the truck.
Really?
Because the line around the block of people. So they didn't even take them in the store. They just started, selling them off the back of the truck.
What were they selling for in the early days then, at that point?
I think $1 or something. It was, I don't remember. But everybody had to have one. And then the interesting thing was that the fad stopped after about 6 weeks, as quick as it had started. But Whammo had ramped up, making hula hoops all over the country, and all of a sudden, everyone had their hula hoop, and we don't need to buy anymore, kind of thing. And so they ended up not making a whole lot of money on the hula because that eat a lot of the product. And that gets back to what we originally were talking about. That got them into the toy industry.
Okay.
And at the same time, that's when Fred Morrison and Whammo got together and did the Pluto platter. So,
well, if they've already ramped up to full-size production on injection molding machines and plastic molding machines, it's not, I guess, I don't know how hard of a gesture it was to retool everything for the Frisbee.
Yeah, I don't know, but anyway, so Whammo was that company that had not just one major toy, but two, and so
And
they were there, therefore, forever and always in the toy industry.
it's cool that the two major toys of Whammo were used together by you and Kevin to start a new
Right?
sport.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I thought Ed would really be excited when I
Right.
saw him at the airport, but that didn't connect for a while.
So early days of Whammo, you're not really hired on. They just ask you to be an unpaid promotions consultant.
Right. Yeah.
This is starting in '69, is that correct?
Yeah. It
Like
started
right
in,
after the All Comers
yeah,
meet?
and I worked with Irv Lander, and so helped him because the way those contests work, which is is a tremendous grassroots marketing idea. In fact, Duncan had done a similar thing with yo-yos earlier, but
Yeah, my dad and his brothers all did the yo-yo thing. Like
yeah,
there's trophies, like keepsake trophies that my grandfather made out of lamps that he used, like these wooden trophies that some of his boys won in the yo-yo contest and made lamps, and then later got that stuff recirculated through the family and everything. So my
yeah,
dad and his brothers were heavy into all that in the the 40s going into the 50s.
right, yeah, and so, but Whammo, we did the junior frisbee contest and the hula hoop, 15-year-olds and younger.
Mhm.
And so a city recreation department would say, yeah, we want to run it. And so then Whammo would sell out or send out a supply of hula hoops and frisbees. And we had little simple rules for both. And then we'd tell them to run their contests. And then we went to a regional contest or a state contest, then a regional contest, then eventually to a national contest. Uh, but the beauty of it was Whammo sent all the equipment, did not have to pay people to come in and run it because it was a great thing for recreation departments because
Yeah.
it gave them a new program kind of thing. And so we
Cool.
started out in 1968 or 69 with the hula hoop and junior frisbee contest, and started out in like 200 cities, and eventually ended up with over 1,000 cities in the country would run those contests.
Well, we'll get into specific World Junior Frisbee Championships in a little bit because that's something that it's for me as a researcher, it's hard to find information out there on that stuff. Every once in a while, in old print magazines, you could find the results from one particular year. But you've sent us from some of your archival material. We'll share that in a little bit here. But we just want to finish off talking about Whammo, the early days.
Yeah,
And one of the interesting questions that occurred to me, at least it was interesting to me, was what was the company culture like in at that time? I mean, you're working for a toy company and they invented the Frisbee. Was it cool? Was it hip? Was it fun? Were they nerds with pocket protectors? What was it like?
yeah. Well, their theme was "Our business is fun." I mean, that was on their trucks and everything, and and it really was. I mean, it was. I mean, you had your typical, you know, arguments about stuff, but overall, you felt, you had a good feeling when you went into Whammo. And and Rich Nerve was just, he's one of those good old boys, let's drink, let's have a can of beer while we're talking about our sales and all that. And Spud was kind of the opposite, very quiet and rarely said much, but he processed it. I mean, he was an engineer, but great. Um, so I mean, it was an interesting dynamic, but they worked extremely well together. And but it was fun. and remind me when we'll talk about when I worked for them full time. And if you'll remind me, I'll tell you a story about the culture part of Wham.
Well, why don't you jump into it right now? Go ahead.
Yeah, feel free. Go ahead. I mean, when did you? Well, so
Okay.
let's start that with when you did start for them full time. When was that?
That was in the end of 1979. And I had, I had been the event director or whatever for a lot of the tournaments and stuff. And then also did demonstrations and stuff. And so they valued my experience. And so when I got a call that they would like to come and talk to me about working for them full time. And so they actually created a new position for me. And so that's when I was hired in 79 full time.
Okay.
And quick little story about that. With it being a new position, they didn't have a title for it. And so they were trying to come up with, and they said, well, how about you're going to be manager of community relations and promotions? And so I heard that, and I said, no, that's not going to work. And they said, what do you mean it's not going to work? I said, no, that's not going to work, because I said, if you use the initials of that, it's crap. Community relations and promotion. So I said, we can't do that. I don't want to manage crap. So they then said, well, how about if we do community relations / promotions? I said, that'll work. That's good. We got
Gotta get that A out of there.
Gotta get that vowel out of there.
So when my first day at work, I walked into my office, and it's hard to see, but this nameplate was on my desk.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
And it's manager of community relations and the word / promotion.
Keeping with the fun theme.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, that was the culture. I mean, that was, it was just fun. But I was going to tell the story, because in '82, that's when Kransco bought Whammo. And Stork had been working full time at Whammo since the mid '70s. And so he was in charge of the players and all that part of the marketing. And so when Stork and I heard that they were sold, we figured we're going to be gone. I mean, there's, because usually a takeover like that, marketing goes first. And but it ended up that we were one of the few divisions that they kept, that Kransco kept. Well, it had been about 6 months after Kransco had taken over, and I get a call from ABC Nightline wanting to do a story on the greatest fads in the history of fads. And so they were doing one on Mrs. Field's cookies and the pet rock, the guy that did the pet rock, and the hula hoop. Okay. Well, I was the only one left at Whammo that kind of knew the history of hula hoops. So the producer said, well, we want to come out, and I told her that, that most of the people that knew the true history of hula hoop and stuff are no longer there because the company was sold. And so she said, well, we want to come, we'll talk to you, and then we'll want to film hula hoops being put together. Okay. So I said, fine. So now keep in mind, Whammo's reputation is our business is fun. And so when she walked in with her film camera crew, she said, we have been so looking forward to coming to Whammo because we had heard so many good things about what a great company it is. The culture is good and all that. And I said, oh yeah, it's really good. And so anyway, so we did the interview in my office, and then we walked back to where they were assembling hula hoops, and that was like almost a half a block walk or more. And so I'm walking with the producer, and so we get back there, and so she sets up her crew and stuff, and then she motions me over to the side, and I said, yeah, and she said, we'd heard that Whammo was just a fun company. And I said, yeah, it is. And she said, well, walking back here, I did not see one person smiling. And I mean, so then I said, well, it was bought out. And so a lot of people were let go. And, they did away with their quality control people. And so I said, it's just been a change. And so she said, well, we were just so excited to see it. And she said, but I just realized nobody was smiling. And I thought, wow, is that a huge message to any company?
That tells the tale right there for sure.
But yeah. And so that was in 1982. In 1985, I had left Whammo and was teaching at East Carolina University in Greenville, North Carolina. And phone rings, I pick it up, and it's the lady who was the producer of Nightline. And I said, wow, I didn't expect to hear from you. And she said, I'm sure you didn't, but said, we tracked you down. And she said, I was wondering, we're going to do a story on corporate takeovers. And we would like to, interview you. And I said, well, why? She said, because I remember walking through there and nobody was smiling. And so that was 3 years.
Wow.
That she had remembered that. So I said, well, I will, that was my business card. But you can see the manager, community relations slash. Yeah. But anyway, I said, well, I will, because it really bothered me too. And that was one of the reasons that I left Whammo too. But I said, I'll do it on one condition two conditions actually. And she said, we'll fly you to DC and do the interview there. And I said, no. I said, I'd like for you to come to East Carolina University and do the interview. So East Carolina University would get a little publicity. And two, that you also interview the people at Kramsko so they can tell their side of things. And so she said, and they ended up doing both of those. But the main point of telling that story was that just, you just never know what people are judging you on. And they love the story about the hula hoop, but.
And certainly the story, I mean, the whole idea of the sale of Whammo really was, it was a real serious turning point, not just because Whammo was sold and they canceled the IFA and canceled the Rose Bowl championships, but the very next year the beveled edge is introduced, and now we have truly disc golf going off on its own with its own specialized equipment. So 82 is kind of the last year where everything is like the last year of disco, as it were, like the last year where it all held together.
Right. Yeah. And
now let's move on. One of the things that we're going to talk about your trip to Germany, but the Germans wanted a world champion, and instead they had to go with a Frisbee master. Before we get to the Germany story, though, can you talk to us about what was the process of becoming a Frisbee master?
Well, it was there's the world-class Frisbee master, and it was a series of accuracy and distance throwing and MTA and TRC and those kinds of other events, and you had to perform at a certain level, like black belt in judo. And so that was I can't remember exactly all of them, but that was the next level up from where you were a Frisbee master. I mean, that was a level, but then the next level that was added in, I think, 71, and that was the world class.
So did you become a world class master?
Yeah, yeah.
And when did you get that? Do you remember?
That was 72, 71, 71,
Okay.
72. Yeah, yeah.
And was
So,
it one of those things where an existing world class master had to judge you on your
right.
qualifications? Do you remember who
Yes.
that was?
I don't, because it was actually 3 or 4 different people. 2 of them were from Whammo. Um, I can't remember.
Okay.
Sport may have been one of them, but yeah.
So
Anyway,
you're as a world class master now, you're invited to go to Germany. What was
well,
that all about?
okay. Um, well, Klaus Albrecht, who owns Spiel Sport Freight is the name of his company, which was uh, and based in Germany. He bought the license for Frisbee in 1971, late 71, 72. And so he wanted to have demonstrations done, and he wanted the world champion, the world Frisbee champion, to, do them. Well, there was no world Frisbee champion, but there were world class Frisbee masters. And so Whammo gave Klaus a couple of names, but anyway, but Klaus asked me if I would come and do that. So it was 6. That's a great camera angle.
That's a world class master grab right
Yeah,
there.
that is, yeah. So, but anyway, so Klaus called, and we set up in June of 1972 to do 6 weeks of tour through Germany, introducing Frisbee, and by the end of May, I guess he had booked so many events, he needed another person to demonstrate. So Bill Snyder uh, added, we added Bill to come over and do that. And so we kind of divided up Germany. But anyway, it was fascinating because we did, of course, nobody knew Frisbee because it was a new thing, unless you'd heard about it in the United States or whatever. But anyway, we did a person on the street interview because there's no TV, there's no public TV, but they did run commercials in theaters. And so they did
Oh, okay.
yeah, so we did a person on the street interview and stopped 10 people and said, didn't show them a Frisbee, just said, do you know what a Frisbee is? And it was a new margarine, it was a new soft drink, and this one little German lady, we said, do you know what Frisbee is? And she goes, oh, Frisbee, yeah, 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 yeah. And just jumping up and down and launched into this whole story, how she had spent the most wonderful week of her life on the Isle of Frisbee. Well, Klaus, he's going crazy and none of us knew that there was an Isle of Frisbee. And so we finished the person on the street interview and actually handed him a Frisbee and said, do you know what this is? And all 10 of them turned it over and said, it's a dog dish.
All 10 of them.
Yeah, all 10. But so Klaus, he's got to find the Isle of Frisbee, because
Like the
and it
El
ended up,
Dorado.
Yeah, it was actually the Isle of Frisian, Frisian, which is
Okay.
she thought it was off the coast of France, and it's kind of more Scandinavian way. But so there was an Isle of Frisian, but not an Isle of Frisbee.
Wow, that's
So,
interesting.
but yeah, but it was, but we did demonstrations at, schools. And then, I mean, Klaus was the kind that if we stopped to get gas, he'd have me out playing catch with him while people were lined up getting their gas.
Take advantage of every opportunity,
Yeah,
right?
right. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, but so that was great fun. And and then the following summer, they while I was there, I talked to them about doing a junior frisbee contest in Germany. So the next year they did that, and brought me back over with uh, the current junior champion,
Wow.
Paul. I can't think Paul's last name, but anyway. Um, but so that was neat that and then that winner then participated in the world finals that year. So we had Germany
Wow.
representing
Paul Wilson
Paul Wilson. Yeah,
from
thank you.
Charleston, West Virginia.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So
So Germany
and
was the
Paul.
first foreign country to participate in the Junior World Championship.
Right. Yeah. Germany and then Canada was close behind that.
Well, this is as good a time as any to jump right into the World Junior Championships, Mace, if you want to take the lead on
Yeah,
that.
right on. Well, and as you can see there, that all happened in the here in the Dallas Fort Worth area at the Cotton Bowl in Fair Park in Dallas, and that's pretty interesting to me because I live right here in Arlington, so and I've been here for quite a while, and that also kind of talks about the gap between then and now, where like I didn't realize that had happened, but I met Patty Kunkel for the first time at one of the overall championships that was held here in like 94, I think, or something like that, somewhere along that line. And honestly, I didn't know anything about all of this history that had already gone on, more than 10 years previous. So it's pretty fascinating too that you guys had a frisbee that was life size for big techs,
Oh, yeah.
you know,
Right. Yeah.
and
That was a big deal in more ways than one.
There.
That
yeah, and there
was
you go. So Big Tex is the mascot for the Texas State Fair still to this day. I think he just got a new pair of pants recently, and maybe the shirt too. Like Dickies is the sponsor, so it's. But yeah, that's something that I was
yeah.
really fascinated to see that. That's pretty cool.
Right. Well, and that was 82. And then in
Yeah.
83, we were back at the Cotton Bowl for the championship. And that's where Sam Ferens was one of the finalists
Okay.
uh, in that.
So
Um,
interesting story. Not only is Sam from La Mirada, but here in 1982, one of our dear friends and certainly a very dear friend of Mace, Craig Leva. He was at the
yeah.
82 tournament, and
Oh, I
Yeah.
looked at those pictures, and I didn't even look that close to see Leviar's picture in there.
so Sam and Craig as juniors clashed often in the SoCal tournaments, and Craig paved the way for Sam to be there in '83.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't thank you enough for sharing all this because it's, as I said, it's very difficult to find information on the World Juniors,
Yeah.
and that's one of the sad ironies that have fallen through the crack is that that's archival, valued, important historical material that is not easily accessed. And
Yeah.
there, I mean, Sam has attended, Craig attended, Steve Valencia won in '85. We've got lots of, and Craig Van Sickle won in '76, I think it was, or '77.
Right.
Really
Oh, yeah.
important names to the history and ongoing development of disc golf had their time at the World Juniors.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and Bill Burns, who went into the Hall of Fame this year,
Right.
he was in the, I think he was 83 also. Maybe,
Well,
yeah,
and another thing that's cool for the locals to my area that go back to the early '90s, in the 1982, the finals was held on a temporary course at Skyline Park, which when I started in the early '90s was the Dallas course. It was permanently installed at that point, and at that point as well, if I'm not mistaken, it was Mach 1 conversion baskets. Or actually, no, it was cable baskets when it first started, the old Lightning cable baskets. So I don't know what happened to the original baskets, but when I first started playing, they had the cable catchers
yeah.
there at
Well, that,
Skyline Park.
yeah. In 82 was the first year that we added disc golf to the finals for the
Okay.
juniors. And so I designed a 9-hole course at Skyline but we just used temporary baskets. But that was the other interesting thing about that, because we'd wanted to have disc golf, but that would have meant that a lot of communities would have had to have disc golf courses, and
Oh, right.
so
Because you've got to qualify to get to the
right, yeah,
finals.
yeah,
Right.
and
Oh yeah, okay.
yeah. So we
So
decided
many of
we
those other games are easy to do without all the specialized equipment, right?
right, yeah, yeah, that's right. So, but it was then the other irony too is that for adults that the first World Championships were held in the Rose Bowl. And then we finally introduced disc golf into the juniors, and we do that at the Cotton Bowl.
Wow.
So,
Now, I have a question.
Nice big bowl iconic
That is big,
venues.
big bowl
right.
energy right there.
Yeah.
Now, I know that when Steve Valencia, but when he went in '85, it was at Six Flags over Georgia. Um, did it start in Dallas at the Cotton Bowl, or where was the first World
The
Junior Frisbee Championships?
first juniors. No, they were, we moved them around.
Okay.
That's, they were, well, one year we were in Baltimore, and I think that was 72, 73. Maybe it was 73, because I think that was the first year that Germany sent theirs over. Uh, but yeah, and then Six Flags, we did it there for 2 or 3 years in a row, and we combined hula hoop and frisbee at the same time. Uh, but the other thing that through all the things that I did during the '70s, I would always include frisbee golf in some form. And even when I did that, the 6 weeks in Germany, uh, we would have some type of, if you're throwing or whatever, but part of the demonstration was this target, and you can play a game all by yourself if you want to, kind of thing. So that was, because I believed in it.
So with the World Juniors, you came on board. I think the first World Juniors was '69, but you probably weren't a part of that organization. You
Well,
probably your
yeah,
first was '70, right?
well, yeah, the '70s, and then so then I would go and run the finals and stuff, but then also I worked with Irv um, to change some of the formats and how we would send out the kits and stuff, and work with recreation departments, and then the regionals. I worked with him on doing that, and so uh, that was.
What was the last year that you were participating in the World Junior program?
It was, well, it was 80, 83. And that's right after that's when I had Guillain-Barré syndrome. And so that and then the kind of the culture change at Whammo was kind of told me I needed to find another place to work. So that's when the job at East Carolina attracted my attention. But the other, a real quick story about the Rose Bowl when but the other thing that I got to do when I was at Whammo, about once a month, I would go to meetings and they talk about new products and all that kind of stuff. And so I got to be in those meetings where they were talking about, well, we're going to have World Frisbee Championships. So where do we have it? Okay, well, most of the people that were playing were college students. So it was, well, we got to have it at certain such college, such, and that, just didn't really fit as far as marketing, because the marketing guys for Whammo, they called Sports Illustrated, called ABC Wide World of Sports, and if we have the World Frisbee Championships, would you cover it? No. And so finally, someone said, "Well, we've done things at the Rose Bowl. Let's have them at the Rose Bowl." And that's what they did. And all of a sudden, they got coverage because it was the Rose Bowl.
Because it was that iconic name.
Yeah, and it wasn't
the venue
used.
Just happened to be available.
That's right. Yeah, because it was really only used back then twice a year. One New Year's Day, and then they had the junior college football championship there.
Oh, okay.
So right. Perfect.
But other than that, it wasn't used. So all of a sudden, you put Frisbee and Rose Bowl together, and wow, well, Frisbee must be something if they're having it at the Rose Bowl.
And well, I mean, go ahead, sorry, Mace.
Well, I was just going to say, since we're talking about the Rose Bowl and the World Championships and stuff like that, tell everybody a little bit about that process. Like you talked about earlier about having to have disc golf in all these other towns so that the kids could qualify, but run down the process of qualifying, whether it was for the juniors or whether it was the adult side of thing, because it was drastically different than what we know. I mean, obviously now things have changed in the World Championship, and you got to be pretty good and you got to have a certain rating to even get a chance to enter. But there was long periods of time where all you had to do was pony up an entry fee, and well, I got my pro card. Here you go. I paid my $75. Now here's my entry fee. So yeah. Tell everybody about the qualifying, and then the fact that if you did qualify, then what you got after that.
Well, it was more invitational. There wasn't necessarily a qualifying for the Rose Bowl. And I'm talking about 74 was definitely invitation, and they perceived who the best players were and all that. And then kind of the same thing happened in 75, but that's when Stork kind of took over being the players representative and all that, and started having more stringent rules to be invited. So that was 75. And then 76, there had been enough events where you could qualify point-wise and all that. But the first 2 or 3 years you had to be invited.
But 76 was kind of the big year that put the World Frisbee Championships and the Rose Bowl finals on the map. And the Rose Bowl was just used as the finals. There was like 4 days of events leading up to that. That was just the Sunday big glam spectacle, wasn't it? And golf had been wrapped up by then. So it's just the spectator friendly events, like they would do ultimate, they would do freestyle, obviously, guts.
Right.
But dogs were big back then.
Dogs were.
Now listen, let me tell you this. The first ever golf disc that I ever bought. I mean, I had Frisbees from back in the day, but the first one, when I went to a store and I said, I'm going to buy this, I'm going to get into this game, my first driver was a Whippet. And I had no idea that was named after and for an actual living dog who was a legend.
I didn't know that until right now.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's sorry. I knew you were going to talk about dogs.
There you go. The world K9 champion.
Yeah,
Ashley
Ashley.
Whippet.
Ashley Whippet. Okay. And yeah, so it was, and I don't know how much time we've got, but there's an interesting story about how the dogs came into being.
Spill
Please.
it.
Yeah, let's hear.
We got time,
Well,
George. We got plenty of time. Game's not till tomorrow.
okay, that's right. Yeah, yeah, you're right. But anyway, it was a Monday night nationally televised baseball game, the Cincinnati and the Dodgers at Dodger Stadium. And I think it was 74, I think 74, 73 or 74. And it was the end of the eighth inning. And all of a sudden, this dog runs out on the field, followed by a human being throwing a frisbee. And the dog jumped like 6 or 7 feet in the air and caught it. Okay. Now, the cardinal rule with covering an event, if somebody runs on the field, the cameras go someplace else, because they don't show any of that stuff.
Right, right.
Well, this one camera guy was so fascinated by this dog catching the frisbee that he kept on it for like 1 or 2 catches, and then I guess somebody told him, you got to stop covering that. So anyway, Ashley runs off into the stands, and they arrest Alex Stein. Alex was Ashley's owner, so they arrested him. Okay,
Really?
but the dog ran off, okay, and could not be found. Well, Whammo the next morning got all these calls from people who had seen that and wanted to know how they, what's the dog and who was and all this stuff. And Whammo had absolutely nothing to do with it. Alex, he did that totally on his own. But they couldn't find Ashley. So Whammo put an ad in the paper, to try to find Ashley. And there was a family about 2 or 3 blocks from Dodger Stadium that had found him and responded. So Ashley was missing for like 2 or 3 days.
Wow.
So, yeah. And so Whammo kind of helped bail Alex out of jail. And so that was the beginning of the dogs.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
That's an
What a
amazing
great
story. So
Yeah.
was it, so he totally just like he felt like he had something to show and he was like,
Yeah,
gonna get in
Yep.
front of everybody one way or the other?
that's right. Yeah.
The
So
frisbee version of a streaker.
What a great
it was. Yeah. Yeah.
What a great story.
Wow.
Yeah, but that was, and Irv Lander kind of jumped in, and he was part of the one that convinced Whammo that they needed to bail Alex out of jail and stuff. But then Irv started, developing the frisbee dog competition.
Well, that whippet, I mean, if you don't know anything about whippets, the whippet's one of the fastest dogs on the planet anyway. So that had to have been amazing to see. Like the
Yeah.
dog's going to be fast, plus the ability to leap and catch the frisbee, which obviously, if you've been to any canine show ever, you're entertained. I mean, there's no lack of entertainment in that situation. But the
Yeah.
speed factor had to have made it even better. I mean,
But even, I mean, if you're in the stands at any game and someone runs on the field, everyone's riveted. Like they might not show it on camera, but everyone in the whole entire field is looking at that person on the field. And
Right.
if they're doing something that nobody's ever seen or thought of before, my God, like that's a world-changing kind of thing, action that happens right there. That's amazing.
it is
Yeah.
amazing.
It was. Yeah.
And so,
and actually, he was a great dog. And later on, they had competitions between Ashley and Dwight Stone, who was the high jump champion.
Oh, really?
See who could jump the highest. And I think they did
You're
it
going to tell us
2
that
or 3.
Ashley won then, huh?
Well, Ashley did win. I think Dwight may have won one time, but I did it like 2 or 3 years in a row. But Dwight was a good sport about it.
That's awesome. So
Yeah.
we when we talked to Cheryl Newland 2 weeks ago, she revealed to us that Doug had a frisbee dog named Luxor, who was a top level performer too, and that got us that at that time got us thinking about canine demonstrations. And we now are looking from this vantage point of the present, looking to the past, thinking the purity of disc golf. But disc golf was just one event among many, and frisbee was just one event. Like frisbee between humans, then you had the
Yeah.
dogs. You had hula hoop action going on there, and also they would pair it up with footbag hacky sack festivals
Mhm.
would happen
Right.
all the time too. So all of these things, the kind of countercultural kind of things coming together, it's hard for people maybe who've only learned about the game in the last 10 years to think of how many different types of people have been at the same event competing. You have in just a built-in stands a whole spectrum of the frisbee field, and that must have been. Did you ever get the sense that you were at the center of the frisbee universe when it was going on?
Yeah.
You did. Okay, you knew.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, uh, again, for me, I was very blessed to see this whole thing through, because what had to happen initially was that frisbee had to be accepted as not a toy, but as a sporting goods item, and that didn't happen until early 70s. Okay, and then for disc golf to emerge on its own, you had to have a standardized hole, and you had to have one that could be permanently in the ground. So that happened in the late 70s, mid to late 70s. So uh, so those two things had to happen before it could grow. Uh, and then in the 80s is when the equipment started to change and all that. But but I was blessed to see it when frisbee truly was a toy, and working with Whammo and getting the inside scoop on things and stuff. That has been a pleasure. And
Now, before we do go, and we're going to have to let you go eventually, but before we do, Mace, why don't you talk to him about his one of his proudest accomplishments and proudest moments in his life?
Let's do that. But I have one quick question about the Rose Bowl. How many events were there? I mean, not individual events. How many years was that event held at the Rose Bowl?
it was first one was 74, and then the last one was 81.
Oh wow, so it
And
ran almost 10 years.
yeah, yeah. So, and there's special discs made for each one.
Mm.
And
And
the
you were
second,
and you were one of the co-event director for all of those?
right, yeah.
That's
Uh,
awesome. Yeah,
and
that's
yeah,
no wonder they hired you and made a position for you. Oh, he's been doing this for us
yeah,
he's been pulling that wagon for years. Let's
that's
put him
right.
on the
Yeah,
staff.
yeah, yeah. So, but Pepsi sponsored in 75, um, and then eventually Mazda sponsored.
Mm.
Yeah. So,
With prizes with no car payments.
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Okay,
So,
so I skipped right back over this and I'm gonna go right back to it. But I learned in our conversation yesterday that one of your proudest achievements was being the Western States liaison for the Eunice Shriver or Eunice Kennedy Shriver for the Special Olympics, and you got frisbee disc sanctioned as an official Special Olympic sport. That's
right.
amazing.
Yeah, and that actually started in 1973, 74, because I was doing a lot of demonstrations at elementary schools, and part of the demonstration would be to also get the kids out and and throw and catch. And and I went to 3 schools in a row where I had a teacher say, "See that kid running?" And the kid was chasing the frisbee rolling on the ground. She said, "I've had him for 2 years and have never seen him run." And then another one, it was similar things, whether it was running or actually catching and moving around. And then one of the teachers said, "My sister teaches at a school for mentally retarded. And would you do a demonstration for them?" I said, "Absolutely." So we did it, and that's the same thing happened there. That several of the teachers commented how they had not seen these particular students move around or whatever. So that triggered then Special Olympics in Fresno County. Asked me to come and talk to them about maybe doing, something with frisbee. And we used the hula hoop as a target. And so that's what we did. And then I decided I'm going to push this, and frisbee is going to be a Special Olympic sport. And so their Special Olympics has the same rules as regular Olympics, that you have to do a demonstration of it at one of the games, the international games. And then
right.
it had to be voted in by, I think there's 50 states and several, anyway, it had to be voted in by 50 or 60%. And so to do that, I had to go to various state events, and WAMO helped with that because they believed in it too. But in 1975, the international games were at Central Michigan University. And so we got it approved for us to do a demonstration. And so it was distance throwing and accuracy throwing. And the other part of to get something in Special Olympics is it had to be tied into an existing Olympic sport. Well, it was an easy thing between discus throwing in the regular Olympics and frisbee discs. So that was the way we got that in. So anyway, we did the demonstration. Joe Cahow was there, Monica Liu, Ed came, and so anyway, it was it was very well received. And then John Bird and I did a lot of the demonstrations together at various state Special Olympic Games, and then it was officially voted in 1979. And what you're showing there, the cartoon pictures of Joe and myself, that was part of the coach's manual for Special Olympics in 1979.
You look like a pair of superheroes with them Green Lantern style.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you totally look like you're about to duck in the phone booth over there in that animation.
Well, do you know why?
No, why?
All right. The person that drew that magazine was the guy that did Superman comics.
Oh, awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so, yeah. So Superman was head coach.
Nice. That's awesome. So as you've been telling this, this is something we didn't talk about yesterday. You just touched on it. And I'd like to say that I intentionally left it alone because I knew you were going to tell us a bunch of gems, but I didn't really think as much about it as that. But one of the things that I learned from Scott Stokely, and then also just on my own, was just how amazing the feeling that you get when you turn the light on for somebody, meaning you just tell them a little tip. Like I remember one time Craig Leva told me to think about pushing down with my thumb as I was approaching the throw to get a shot that was all hyzer. And that's super simple because you push with your thumb and you cock your hand forward and it changes your release angle coming out of your hand. And so there's been times where I've told people, been able to tell people things and give them tips and super simple pointers, and then you see immediately. It isn't always immediate, but when you do see it immediately, and then that they just light up. And I've
Oh,
called
yeah.
that the light. You turned on the light for them. I've been referring to that for years. And you turned on the light for all these Special Olympians. Like right from I can only just imagine how good that must have felt at that very first demo. And that teacher came and said, "I've never seen him run. I've never seen him do anything like that." And you facilitated that. That's
Right.
amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it does. It just grabs at your heart, and
Feeds your
and
soul.
yeah, yeah, it does. And so it was, that truly was the thing that was most gratifying to me, actually, in my entire Frisbee career.
In
That
your
was probably,
entire direction of recreation career.
yeah. That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And unfortunately, now Frisbee disc, they've pulled it out of Special Olympics, but they've now's the perfect time to get disc golf into Special Olympics, because ball golf is an Olympic sport now.
Right.
And so I'm going to challenge anyone out there who will take that on to get disc golf into Special Olympics.
Anyone out there in YouTube land, pick up the gauntlet, move it forward.
Yeah, yeah.
Leave it better than how you found it, for sure. So we're going to wrap up here. You've been very generous with your time and stories, but before we do, we have to talk about the Hall of Fame. And you're wearing the World Disc Golf Hall of Fame shirt. You represent, so there's 9 directors of the board, and Andy Lehman Young is the executive director. You're the assistant executive director. So there's 11 of you total. And we've interviewed 7 now of the board and the executive, with Captain Snap and Dave Greenwell as our 2 next guests, leaving only Tom Monroe, Stork, and Royce Razzle Dazzle Razanowski as guests that we haven't talked to. Such an amazing brain trust of skills, talents, and disc golf history together guiding this. You've talked a lot in your recent interviews about the World Disc Golf Hall of Fame, but is there anything you want to add right now about the work that you've done and the work you continue to do, and anything on the horizon?
Yeah, well, one of the things that Andy and I have decided that we wanted to have happen when we took over, because Speedy Guerrero had done a great job of administering the Hall of Fame, but then it was time for him to retire on his own. He made that decision, and so when Andy and I took over, we decided we were going to kind of bring the Hall of Fame out of the shadows and let people know that it's a standalone organization. Most people think it's PDGA Hall of Fame, and it's not. They are gracious enough to let us have our plaques there, but then we don't get any funding from them or whatever, and they're supportive, but the Hall of Fame is a standalone thing. And then we realized that disc golf is a worldwide sport. I mean, every continent has a disc golf course, including Antarctica. So, so it needs to be not just the Disc Golf Hall of Fame. It needs to be the World Disc Golf Hall of Fame. So that's what we've done officially this year. It's now the World Disc Golf Hall of Fame. And we now have 104 members, and representing 4 continents. So now we've outgrown the IDGC, and we've talked with them, and they can't expand anymore. And so our main mission now is to find a permanent home for the Disc Golf Hall of Fame, and have a building that represents it, and courses and all that. So we've started a fundraising campaign for that, and in the process of looking for a permanent home kind of thing. So that's an open thing. Anybody has any suggestions on things, and has a few $1 million that they'd like to help with, we'll be glad to accept it. But no, I mean, truly, we want it to get the respect that all the people that have helped build this sport deserve. And so that is why we refer to it as the highest honor. And so that is what we're working on now. And we've actually started our campaign, nomination campaign, and voting process. Voting is done by Hall of Fame members, and nominations are accepted from Hall of Fame members. So if anyone out there thinks so-and-so needs to be in the Hall of Fame, then if you don't know a Hall of Fame member, then contact either Andy or me, and we will put you in touch with someone who can put that name and nomination in. So that is actually this month that those are being accepted.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
so
cool.
It's,
Dave McCormick asked me one time, a couple summers or a couple springs ago, he goes, who do you think should be in the Hall of Fame? And I was like, what is this? What is that question about? He goes, well, we're about to nominate people. He goes, somebody that I should pay attention to or that I should look into. And that was really cool that he asked around. And I imagine that a lot of other people are asking around too, and or they have their own ideas. But it's really amazing that you guys are really bringing it out into the light. And you and I talked heavily about this yesterday, and obviously I've got huge history with the USCGC, and that was one of the things that was added and since y'all stepped in, and since COVID, where that announcement or that induction was actually happening as another event at United States Disc Golf Championship. So if you didn't already have enough reasons to come to the event, here's another good reason. And I don't know what the numbers were last year, but it was at least 2 rows in that section of the attending members that were there for that ceremony that happened at the back end of the players meeting at the United States Disc Golf Championship / Throw Pink Women's Championship last year.
yeah,
I think it's a great place for it and a great month.
Well, we'll be back there again, October 9th.
Yeah, it was chilling to be part of that ceremony, and I felt sad that some of the younger players took the opportunity to leave before the induction ceremonies. But it's, this is a Frisbee family. This is real life Frisbee history, and the people who shaped and developed the game and left it to us as it is should be justly honored. And so you guys are doing great work. Honestly,
Well,
it's beautiful.
Yeah, we're open to suggestions, and I mean it's a family effort in all this. There were a little over 30, I think 31 or 32 World Disc Hall of Famers.
Lots of them. It was every time I turned around, I was seeing somebody else. I was like, oh, okay, so you came for this too. And again, I've been to all of them, so all the USCGCs, and it's not been the easiest thing to get people to come over the years for a variety of different reasons. And it's, that's another thing that I feel like Jonathan and Harold had a really good idea there, if they're to blame for it, or else it was a great idea that they accepted it, if someone else suggested it from outside. But it's just a perfect time, a perfect platform, and a perfect venue for your next induction.
Yeah, it is. And and the criteria, you now have to be 45 years of age as of the year of the induction year. And and then also there's 2 categories. One is competitors and one is contributors, or both. But those, you can see that at our website, the World Disc Golf Hall of Fame
.org.
for criteria. But before you go, I've got to tell 2 quick stories if I can.
Go ahead.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, go right ahead, please.
Okay. All right. Okay. When I told you I used to go to Whammo for meetings periodically back in the 70s, like once a month I'd get invited to them. Well, in 1972, I was invited talk about a new disc that they were going to design, and that was the World Class disc. And so the meeting was coming up with names for the discs. So we're going to have 3 sizes. And so I asked, well, tell me about the discs themselves. And they said, well, it's going to be this diameter, and one will be 119 grams, the other one 141 grams, another one 165 grams. And so I said, well, that's very easy to what the name should be. And I'm kind of being smarty about it. But anyway, I had purchased a year before a 1970 Datsun 240Z. And that's what I was driving. It's out in the parking lot. So I'm hearing 119 grams. 100. So I said, it's very easy. It's 119G, 141G, and a 165G. And so that's how
all you.
Yeah.
Tongue in cheek, and that's all you. I love it.
Right. And so that's why I was trying to find that picture to send you of my 240Z, because I was going to ask you, if you could guess what that has to do with disc golf. So,
that's
and then
the other really cool.
Yeah, and then the other one was tell you a real quick story about Tom Seaver, because in the IFA newsletter that announced the winners of the all-comers meet, that was the anyway, the story here was listed who won. Okay, well, Jay Shelton won the Frisbee golf competition, but on that page is a picture of Seaver and let's see, Bob, I can't remember. Anyway, he was a general manager of Whammo. Okay, well, Tom, they took that picture because I took Tom out to Whammo just so he could see it and stuff. Because Tom and I grew up together, lived half a block apart. But my quick story is that in 1969, whenever the Mets were playing the Dodgers, Tom and I would get together for dinner or lunch, or after. We always saw each other after games. So anyway, he said, well, let's have lunch. And he said, we're staying at the Ambassador Hotel, so I'll meet you in the lobby. Okay. So I go in, walk in the lobby, and I'm looking for him. I look over, and there is Tom standing with Yogi Berra and Buddy Harrelson, who is the Mets shortstop, Nolan Ryan, and Tom.
Wow.
So I walk up, and so I kind of joined the conversation. Well, I'd been there about 3 or 4 minutes, and this little kid comes up to Yogi Berra, tugs on his sleeve, and has a baseball. So he hands it to Yogi, and Yogi signs it, hands it to Buddy Harrelson. Buddy signs it, hands it to Nolan Ryan, hands it to Tom. Tom hands it to me. And I kind of look at him, and he goes, okay, so I sign it. All right, well, the little kid runs over because his parents were sitting on the couch over there. So he runs over, he's so excited. And he hands the ball to his dad. And his dad is talking to his wife and going, So, yeah, the reason I wanted to tell that story is because someplace in this country, there is a baseball that has
those guys and you.
And me. And I'm now a Hall of Famer. So, yeah.
So
But
that
anyway,
ball's covered in Hall of Famers.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
So listen, before we do let you go, I dug this up. I found this. I can't remember where I found it, but I found it somewhere. Maybe it was a discussion board. But This is from Steve Russell in Fresno, California, and this is his quote. George is a great ambassador to the Frisbee golf world, and I remember meeting him in the late 60s when he worked here in Fresno while going to school. He worked with my dad, and he got me and my brother a baseball signed to us from Tom Seaver. This might be the thing. The great pitcher that sadly passed away this week. I wanted to thank him for this and let him know how much we appreciated him doing this. Thank you, George, and I hope you were well. So, you've got a lot of fans in a lot of corners of the world, and maybe they're not as vocal about it, but definitely you've cast a long shadow, and you've had a deep imprint in the culture and the sport of disc golf. And we can't thank you enough for that, first of all, but also for joining us and taking so much time and being so generous with all of your stories.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's an honor for me to be on with you guys because we really appreciate what you're doing with the Good Times Hour. It's really spreading the word and making even the new players aware of there's something before you.
Yeah.
Well, and honestly, that's our goal with all this. But I want to, I mean, that there's a couple other goals too. But the thing that Paul and I struck on in the very beginning about this is trying to preserve these stories and move them forward and continue to tell them. But one of the things that I told a couple of your stories last night with my friends. I took all my guys yesterday out for like a season ender for our Christmas light crew, and I was telling them a story about the bamboo hula hoop and a few other things that I got from the conversation the other day, and I was kind of thinking about it last night, just kind of in retrospect, not just the talk with you, but starting with Tita this year and running through all of y'all that all the Pioneer ladies plus yourself. Now we're going to Captain Snap and then Dave Greenwell as well. And I've learned a lot just in these last 6 weeks, and I thought I knew a lot, and I know that I do know lots, but it just makes me realize how much more there is even for myself to learn, let alone anybody else that might tune in. So we really, really appreciate you, getting your visual aids out and sending us the photos and everything like that. And not just you, but everybody else as well. And this is getting more and more fun all the time, and just having the opportunity to continue to help y'all tell your stories just really means a lot to both of us.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you letting me be a part of it because it's great. What's on the screen now is a course that I designed locally, and the county commissioners surprised me and named it after me, which was very nice. But it's a course that's about 20 miles west of Winston-Salem, and it's a beginner's course. So it's listed in UDisc. So, but we put it in about 2 years ago, and the person with me is my son, Scott.
Nice.
And so, yeah, so he, but I appreciate you showing that. But again, the other thing we're doing with the Hall of Fames is we're trying to create as many state halls of fame and country halls of fame too, so that we can, because there's no way that all the people that probably deserve to be in the World Disc Golf Hall of Fame will get in. But but anyway, so thank you guys very much.
Wow. Thank you,
No
George.
problem, Jordan. Thank you.
It was great to meet you in South Carolina, and hopefully I can get back there again. Until then, keep doing what you do, keep spreading the smiles, and keep logging the miles and doing what you need to do to advance the game even further. And we'll always be here, so if you want to come back, you can always grace our doors once more time.
Okay, well, if you need a filler, I'll be glad. I got plenty more stories.
Well, and that's what we're looking for is more and more stories. These stories are, everybody's got a really unique story, and not everybody has a boxcar mama story, but your stories with Tom Seaver, that lobby story, you're now in the Baseball Hall of Fame, except for wait a minute, he is not in here. No, just kidding. But that's those kind of things I like those just as much as any of the rest of it.
Yeah. Well, when Tom went into the Baseball Hall of Fame, that was in '92. So I was at the ceremony. In fact, Scott, my son, and I were there with a bunch of people from Fresno. But then when I was voted into the Disc Golf Hall of Fame, I called Tom and I said, well, I have now one-upped you. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I am now in the Disc Golf Hall of Fame. And he said, yeah, so it's, and I said, well, I've one-upped you because it is an international Hall of Fame and you are only in a national Hall of Fame.
Zing.
Yeah, so he got a good kick out of that. He would tease me every now and then. He said, now, what's that stupid game that you helped him down?
But see, he
You ready
played
to
it
go play
back in the
around,
day.
Tom? Let's go.
Yeah.
You did teach him how to play a little bit. He did play a little bit, but he just didn't like it as much.
Right. Exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway.
All right. Well, George, thanks
Go.
again. And,
Yeah.
you know, we wish you all the best and we look forward to seeing you again down the road.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Take care, guys.
All right, y'all
See ya.
have a good day, and thanks for stopping by.
Bye.